a gleaming round thing being passed, carefully, wave to wave, until it was laid at the feet of Shoola in a ring of sea foam. It was a beautiful shell, larger than any clam or mussel or scallop, larger even than the abalone, and brighter, much brighter. It was so bright that to look into the center of it made the stomach spin. "Oh, Eemook, you were right," the girl cried. "For every footprint there must be a foot." And so saying, she picked up the shell, which was bigger than both her spread hands, and it gleamed between the young pair like a pool of moonlight, and she held it out for the boy to try the handle. The scalloped rim fit perfectly with the flared end of the rib bone. "I will use it to serve the feast night stew," Eemook declared, "and all the women will gape and pluck at their throats, and all the men will say that Eemook is the most marvelous maker of spoons in all the houses and all the shores, and your father will stop calling me a worthless frog. And perhaps your grandmother will stop pelting me with muddy roots," Shoola added, joining her friend in his excitement. "But oh no, you must not do that," Shoola said suddenly. "If you do, Father is sure to declare potlatch, and then you would have to throw it away." When a potlatch was declared, each member of the tribe had to give up his most prized possession. It was the way that the watcher and giver kept the people from growing too proud over each other. Eemook knew Shoola was right. Whenever one of the men made a better spear than the chief's, the spear declared potlatch, and he could always order himself another spear. The chief would have the marvelous spoon destroyed if he could not possess it. And then Eemook's eyes brightened. "We will have our own feast night then, and no fathers or grandmothers. We shall invite all my family to the feast. Here," and the boy held the bone aloft, "they can see how I have honored them with my carving, and I will introduce you to them. I will say, 'Mr. Squirrel, this is Shoola, bringer of good luck, and my lifelong friend. Shoola, this is Tzik-Tzik, the squirrel.'" And from behind the rock came the product of their play, a bone-white squirrel with his bushy tail held high and his eyes shining. He bowed gracefully to the girl, and she bowed back. "And this is Miss Loon," Eemook continued. A young loon appeared, wearing a bead necklace. "Please say hello to Shoola, who is also becoming a woman." "You are very beautiful," the loon said. "And you," Shoola said, blushing. "And this is Mr. Oozle." One after the other, the creatures appeared and joined the young couple in their fancy, dancing around them in the sand. As they danced, the boy's legs straightened, and the crook released his lock on his back, and he threw aside the 2 pine canes and joined in the dance, and around the rock they danced, faster and faster, and wilder they danced for what seemed hours, and the hours might have become days and weeks if Talugak, the crow, had not suddenly swooped in from the sea, calling his ominous warning, "Stormclaw! Bad Stormclaw! Claw! Claw!" Immediately a furious flash of lightning shattered the beach's fantasy. The animals vanished. The wind was once more whipping the waves, and the women again were rushing to gather the last of the fish. A towering wave smashed the rocks and sent the men scurrying up the cliff with their spears. Winter had indeed arrived. "That lying crow was speaking the truth this time," Shoola shouted against the wind. Eemook grabbed up his tools and walking sticks and hurried to the footholds cut in the cliff. Shoola ran to help him, handing up his tools and his sticks. She hurried after him. It was not until then that they reached the bluff, and they looked back, and Eemook suddenly remembered the wonderful prize. He saw it on the beach stone below, gleaming like the moon in a pool. "Shoola!" he shouted against the rising gale. "The shell! The shell!" The girl leaped back to the beach, but it was too late. A second giant wave was already rolling toward the big stone. When it rolled back, the girl was drenched, and the stone swept bare. The sea that had so gently bestowed the gift had just as cruelly reclaimed it. Inside the longhouse, there was a storm almost as furious as the one outside. All was confusion and turmoil and last-minute frenzy to batten the holes and windows against the storm. The firemaker was building the center fire as fast as he could, break sticks. The small children were hugging each other in fright, and the big children's eyes were big with the lightning flash through the cracks in the cedar planks. The fire was beginning to roar when suddenly the chief held up his hands. "Where is Shoola?" he demanded. "Where is my daughter?" "And Eemook," the old woman grandmother cried. "My little Eemook, where is he?" "Perhaps the tide has finally reclaimed him," said one of the chief's wives. and our poor daughter in the bargain." Just then there was a pounding at the big door at the entrance of the longhouse. The men rushed to undo the thongs. The young couple staggered in, drenched and gasping, dragging Eemook's bags behind them. "You troublesome toad!" the chief cursed, kicking Eemook. "You will be the poison of us all." He kicked Eemook all the way to the darkest end of the longhouse, where his grandmother wrapped him in her arms. When the door was once again lashed fast and the cracks caulked, the preparations for the evening meal resumed. The heating stones were dug from the fire pit and dropped steaming into the cook pots. The women began to grind the roots and fish eggs together on the family stones to make the cakes. The men smoked and rocked on their hunkers and hummed the ancient to calm the tempest. The old grandmother chanted her soothing chants when she wasn't grumbling, but the chants went unheeded, and the storm grew wilder. The wind began to shake the house so terribly that all the children were soon shivering with terror, big or little. "Make a show, Wind Widow," the chief commanded. "Quiet these puppies. What are you here for?" So the old grandmother arranged her oil lamp to cast a bright beam against the sheltered drum of elk bladder, and she began to make shadow figures with her hands and bits of stick feathers, singing as she did. Then, "Here is the chick, the child of the surf scoter, lost on the beach, crying in the storm, afraid of the sea. Aye-yee, aye-yee, what will become of me, of me?" The frightened children began to creep toward the old woman's shadow song. Eemook watched as he arranged his spoons along the wall with the rest of the carvings. He smiled to himself at the old woman's tender wizardry. How many nights had he watched his grandmother charm the children from their fears, just as she had once charmed him? How many seasons? He looked to see if Shoola was listening. Her hands, the old hands, produced another shadow. "Now here is the mother scoter, circling down from the blue to spread her wings over the child, singing, 'Calloo, calloo, nothing will happen to you, to you.'" The wind outside did seem to subside a little. The children settled down around the grandmother. She continued her play. Through the smoke, the cooking pot steamed. At the fire pit, Shoola had removed her doe-skin blouse and was drying her hair in the firelight. When she looked up and saw Eemook watching, she smiled and tossed her head as she had on the beach. Eemook blushed and turned quickly away to watch the shadow show. "Now here is the otter pup," sang the grandmother as her old hands made a bobbing shadow. "Tossed in the waves, ye-yi, ye-yi, I will drown and die, and die." A larger shadow came bobbing along. "Now here is the father otter, my child, come ride to our den. It is warm and safe and secret within, within." The children all laughed to see the small shadow leap up to the back of the larger and go bobbing away. The fear was ebbing away also. The grandmother had just started to make the next shadow creature when, to the astonishment of all, another loud banging was heard at the longhouse door. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone stared, all the tribe inside. Who could it be outside in this fury? The banging continued, but no one moved. Boom, boom, boom. The eyes turned to the chief. Finally, the chief cleared his throat and called at the booming door. "Who is there? Booming in the night. Speak." "A traveler," the answer came back in a voice deep with echo as from a cave. "A simple traveler seeking shelter and a bit of food." "Do we know you?" the chief called. "I am a stranger." "How do we know that you are not an enemy?" The chief motioned for one of his wives to hand him his fish spear from the wall. "How do we know that you are only one and not a tribe of enemies come to take our winter's store and our women? How do we know what tribe you are? How do we—" But before the chief could finish the question or the voice make an answer, a mighty gust of wind blew the door wide, and a thundering flash revealed the stranger, standing silhouetted, as tall as the big doorway itself. "I am my own tribe," the silhouette said, and stepped over the thresh stone into the light of the fire pit. All of the people gaped at this apparition, especially the women. for he was majestically handsome. His eyes were green, and his hair gold, and he was taller by a head than the tallest of the tribe, and he was clothed like a king. He was wrapped from shoulder to foot in a long robe of fire that was the same color as his golden hair. On his forehead sat a peaked fur cap studded with stones that glittered more brightly than any the tribe had ever seen. On his waist and ankles rattled bracelets of the same. But most impressive by far was the amulet that hung around the stranger's neck like the moon on a leash. Eemook gasped when he saw it. It was the great shell they had found on the beach. It could be no other. Eemook glanced back to Shoola to see if his friend recognized the shell, but her eyes showed that she was as spellbound as the rest of the women by this wondrous stranger with his royal garments and his deep green eyes and his long glowing mane. "I beg only a few simple scraps," the stranger said, his amber eyes darting about the longhouse at all the women cooking, "if your tribe can spare them." Shaking himself from his amazement, the chief promised his visitor all he could eat from the chieftain's pot as soon as it was cooked. He asked if there was anything else he wanted. "I would also enjoy a piece of cold floor to sleep on," the stranger said, his eyes dancing from face to blushing face. "And a warm maid to share it with," the old grandmother muttered, for she did not feel at all good about this intruder. Though she had merely whispered, the stranger turned straight from the old woman, his eyes burning green. She met his gaze, and for a moment the air between them crackled and smelled of flint. Then the stranger began walking. Without a word to the chief or anyone else, he strode straight to old Um-Lalagic. "So, grandmother," he said, smiling about at Eemook and the cluster of children, "I see you make shadow dances for the children." She told them that she always did make shadow dances at storm time to soothe them during the rumpus. "Make a dance then," he bade her. "We will see if there is magic in your shades." "Who are you to order me?" she sneered, but the chief called to her, "Do as he commands, dung sack. Any eye can see that this brave is of royal blood, and perhaps a chieftain king. Obey him." Reluctantly, the old woman turned back to the light lamp. "Then here is the frog," she chanted, jumping and singing because the rain does not worry him. Jum bump, because the rain does not trouble him." "Then here, then," the stranger interrupted, casting his own shadow on the wall, "is the salamander that swallows the frog. Gallop, gallop, and nothing bothers the frog." The frog disappeared into the jaws of the lizard. The children all applauded with glee, and the people laughed. But Eemook saw that his grandmother was not at all pleased. "Then here, then," she sang, "is the big blue heron that swoops down on the salamander. His beak is like a flint arrow, and his neck is like a drawn bow." The bill of the shadow bird was cocked to stab down, but the lizard changed at once into a bigger shadow with sharp teeth and ears and a bristling tail. "Then here is Kajortok, the fox," the stranger said quite pleasantly, to snap the heron's long neck. And it was done. "Then here," the old woman hissed, "is Scree, the bobcat, to rip the fox's belly." And it was done. "And here," the man countered, "is Amortok, the wolf, to crush the bobcat's neck." And this too was done. "Then here is the great she-bear," the old woman said, "the great white she-bear from the far white north, to slap the wolf's head all the way off with his she-bear claws." She said this triumphantly, for she knew that there was nothing on earth could best the great white she-bear from the north. The man only smiled. "But here, then," he said, "is Cthulhu,